Our bellies being filled? All right, good. We are going to start our second panel, and I'm here to introduce our moderator for this evening. She happens to be a friend of mine here in Boston who does great work. She is a teacher in the Newton school system. Bringing to the stage now, Dr. Parker.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start by just asking all of the panelists to introduce themselves and how you identify.
Good afternoon. My name is Genesis Tramaine, and I identify as a Black woman.
And you're
Let me get into the love.
Yeah.
Hello again. My name is Genesis Tramaine, and I identify as a Black woman.
Good afternoon. My name is LaShay Harvey, and I too identify as a Black woman.
My name is Freeman, and I identify as a queer Black woman.
Oh.
Hi, Delhia Emaneul, and I didn't even think about that. I'm a Latina and a woman lover, and that's pretty much how I am.
Constance Robinson, and I am a Black Butch dyke.
I'm Thiadora Pina. I identify as Thiadora Pina. I don't really
My name is Stef Harvey, and I identify as a person of color.
I don't think I said that.
My check, y'all hear me?
Don't worry, I won't do this the whole time. My name is Holmes, and I identify as a Black queer boy, and that's spelled B-O-I. Kind of tackling the fluidity around gender presentation and masculine identity. So.
A round of applause for our panel, please. Okay, so we'll just get it started with this question for LaShay and Stef. So the first question is, what is the relationship between gender identity and sexual orientation?
All right, Stef. Well, the connection is is a quite present connection, but I think to get us going, we seem to think that they are one and the same, and they're not. So the first part of that, if we're talking about gender identity, typically is an internal space, internal compass, how one sees themselves, and then essentially presents that to the world. When we start talking about orientation, who you like, who you don't like, and whose genitals you may or may not like. So we can, that essentially, swiftly stops there. Stef, you got this?
Yeah, just to echo that's kind of cool. To echo what LaShay was saying, exactly. I don't think that they're two of the same, and I think that that's where the misconception is, that people always try to identify, just because who you identify as, then they try to connect that with who you sleep with at the same time. And I just think that there's just no language for what happens in between. How the two are not connected is just the fact that there is no language for that.
Thank you. The next question for Constance and for Ryan. The definition of gender expression and identity differs from state to state. What is your definition of gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation?
Repeat that again?
Constance.
Yes. Dr. Butch.
The definition of gender expression and identity differs from state to state. What is your definition of gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation?
For me, my definition, which would be different than anyone else's, I mean, you have your own, but gender expression is your outward, to me, my outward expression, how I put myself out there. My gender identity, for me, identifies female. My orientation is I'm a dyke, I like women, so, but I think it's who you are and how you identify.
We're gonna work this out with this mic, y'all. We really will. So I think for me, when it comes to describing gender expression, I think it has a lot to do with how you choose to perform gender in your body, how you choose to sort of take the pieces of what has been sort of constructed and form that to your own being, to your own spirit. And I think it differs from state to state, but I think it essentially differs from individual to individual. And how we choose to express that is a huge part of who we are, especially if we have the privilege of doing it fully, or the affirmation to feel that we can actually express ourselves that way. And as far as gender identity, I think it also has to do with like the spirit of who you are. I think that the fluidity that exists across gender is something that isn't sort of resonated as we grow up and different stuff like that, but being able to kind of own that space and be who you are, regardless of whatever parts you were born with, or regardless of what clothes you were wearing when you were growing up based on what you had to do or whatever. But, you know what I'm saying? And then sexual orientation is who you choose to love. And it's funny because I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today around just like, you know, stud to stud love and just like things that are sort of just not, and especially as people of color, like we don't get the space to really explore our sexual orientation without getting a lot of shit for it. We don't get the space to express a lot of shit. So sort of like owning that and talking about it, starting dialogue around it. I feel like I'm going on a whole nother tangent, but why'd you pass it to the But in a nutshell, I guess that's how I view those things.
Thank you. Delhia and Genesis, what are some of the common misconceptions regarding your identity you've encountered?
I'll jump in. My fluidity as a woman, I guess, changes day to day. So a lot of it depends on what I'm working with. If I have to fit it on, and my jeans fitted, then I tend to take on a lot of the stereotypes that are cast against black men. And I walk with that level of responsibility, with the shadow of being a black woman underneath. And I think that, you know, if I'm getting a manicure, after I just got my hair cut, then, you know, then I'm viewed differently. And I carry the stigmas of being a black woman. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, we walk with the stereotypes of what it means to be black. And I've learned as I grow spiritually that they're really not, that's what it is walking around while black. So whatever the stereotypes those are in 2012 is a lot of what I walk with.
A lot of misconceptions, I think, are not so much with the heterosexual community, because I don't really pay attention to them. I don't get my directives from people that can't direct themselves, but when you think about identity, you know, the misconceptions that I think I deal with the most are within our own community. You know, we have the misconceptions that women who are masculine-centered are predators, you know, players, and oh, you can't probably love one. And I said, well, yeah, you can at a time. But they still feel that you can't give your heart fully and in a committed way depending on how you carry yourself, or you can't be a nurturer. You know, we might not have the warm and fuzzy that others may have, but we can care. We can cook, we can clean, we can build, we can do all sorts of things. And, you know, when that's presented, they say, oh, well, you can cook a meal? Well, yes, honey, I need to cook. So those kinds of things, like and the sensitivity, it's like, don't think that I'm weak because I can be sensitive with you. Don't get it twisted. Because I'm sensitive with you doesn't mean I'm sensitive with everybody. You know, you work and live in a shark tank. But when you come to your family and your friends and those who you care about, you know, you want to have another side, because we all have multiple sides. Where you can share who you are and be a genuine person, and you just happen to be masculine. It's like, but, you know, even my father loved me, so I was like, oh, okay. You know, you can do this. He cooked, he cleaned, he did all that. So, you know, I do feel privileged that I was never confused about, you know, my gender. It's like, well, I know I have these and this wonderful thing, but, you know, I have two great parents who raised me to be an independent person, and as masculine as I am, you know, my father said, well, you know, there's a responsibility that goes along with finding the right wife and doing the right thing. And I said, you're absolutely right. So to me, it was never a thought about the identity. It's like, I am who I am, and what you see is what you get. And I don't apologize for it, and I have to live with me. And if you don't accept me, then that's your issue. It's not mine. I can still cook, clean, sew, and do everything I need to do, and still feel and make the money, honey. Ladies like nice things, and I love buying them. You know, and that's how I feel. That's how I identify. You know, and I don't make excuses about it.
Thank you. I'll just open this one up to the panel. I'll hear from a couple of you. Many people in the community prefer to use labels as a point of reference when choosing their partners, their friends, and or their associates. What do you prefer? Well,
Yes, absolutely.
I just, you know, no, for real. You know, Brooklyn Boyhood has really been a blessing to me, truly, and to my walk as a queer person, and then to my walk as a Black person. It really has we have created a space which allows us to just be who we are. So I don't, I don't know. I guess I feel very privileged in being able to choose the label I stand under, which a lot of people just don't have. I think that identifying as a Black woman speaks to the complexities of who I am, and it's not my fault if in 2012 there are not terms that speak to my presence. I think shame on Webster, not shame on us. So as far as labeling goes, if we continue to keep ourselves divided by these labels, it's okay to identify, it's important to identify as who you are, but not if it means excluding who we are. So, I don't know, I hope I answered that.
So what Genesis was saying, I totally agree that from a humanistic standpoint, we need to kind of know what's green, what's blue, what's red, what's a car, what's a dog. So in those levels, categories are wonderful. But Genesis made an amazing point that choice is privilege. And the true issue is that there are some people who are upset because they are not exercising their own privilege to choose. So then the flag then comes back because I may or may not. And one thing that I think, I want to say Black people, but I'm going to say people of color all the way around, we feel very duped if you don't tell who you are. This level of like, you owe it to me to tell me who you are. Otherwise, what am I going to do with my own self? And so we do have to understand that there is a level of relationship that happens, and for some people, I need to know who you are so I know who I need to be. So sometimes we have to give a little leniency to say, oh, that's your walk, that's not mine. But again, I do understand what Genesis is saying. That level of privilege, we have to be careful that if we are walking in it, just like any other privilege, somebody's going to have something to say about it. So be present to that.
anyone else want to comment on that one? Probably do one or two more.
Well, I can comment on my own label. So how I label myself, and I work with young people age 13 through 25 in Boston at a drop-in center for GLBTQ youth. How I always present myself is that I identify as a queer Black woman with a Y, W-O-M-Y-N. Right. So that's how I identify. And so I got into a conversation with a friend of mine that asked, so why do you put them in that order? Because you always think, you know, well, am I a woman first? Am I a woman of color? Am I a woman who is Black? Am I a queer person that is Black and a woman? What does that look like? I put it in order of what my qualifiers are or what people don't see me as. So I'm queer, You wouldn't think I was queer if I was walking down the street. That's a part of my privilege. We were just talking about that. I'm black. A lot of people equate black with men or just being man. And I'm also a woman. And so based off of media and what we see and what we're looking at, what I saw growing up and why I don't identify as a lesbian is that lesbian equals white. So what we're getting these messages is that women also equals white. So it's very, very clear that I'm a queer black woman. And I don't identify as a lesbian. I'm queer, but I don't identify as heterosexual, and I'm not bisexual.
Okay, this next question I'll open to Hope, to Constance, to Delhia, to LaShay. What is considered butch enough? What is considered femme enough? Who decides? Wow.
I just, that just sounds so funny to me. Because, I mean, what is butch enough? I mean, that's how, again, it's your identifier, okay, and how you walk your walk. Like me, I walk down the street, I can't hide the fact that I'm black. I certainly can't hide the fact that I'm not heterosexual. But that whole, like, butch enough, femme enough thing, I think, is so fluid. And, you know, it goes to, I think, some of the reactions that people have when they see two butches, quote-unquote, butches together. You know, and feeling, oh, that's not right. Or somehow it's okay for two femmes to be together. Or, well, who does what? You know? Like, I cook. My partner does not cook. Okay? So does that make me less butch? I don't think so. My partner takes out the garbage. I don't. Does that make her less femme? I don't know. I mean, I think it's just. I really have a hard time to just find it such a butch enough, femme enough. I don't know. I just have a hard time with that one.
Well, I had someone I was dating tell me that I wasn't femme enough, and I wasn't femme enough because I didn't wear heels when we went out to the club, or I didn't wear, I didn't wear like short skirts or something like that. So it's hard for me navigating my identity, one, about, you know, being invisible or not being seen as it is as a queer black woman or a queer black person, but also trying to live up to the standards of somebody else based off of their own notions of what they want their gender role and their relationship to look like, which can possibly be unfair to me. So I remember being in this relationship and wanting to live up to that standard and it not being cute. Like, I like shoes, don't get twisted, like ask anybody that I know on this panel, but I mean, it's different than that. It's more than that for me. And so being femme means that I'm an active partner with my partner. Being femme for me means whatever pillow princess means, I don't know what the hell that means because that makes no sense to me, right? You know what I mean? So it's just, being a femme for me means being an active and involved partner and also being able to stand up for yourself as a female identified person.
I think it's also two people's comfort levels, because people need to put you somewhere. I mean, back to what you said.
There's chaos if there's no labels.
Right. You know, it's like, I need to know who you are, what you are, you know? And yeah. So I think it's a lot having to do with other people's comfort level, on wanting to identify you, wanting to put you in some category that makes sense to them.
I agree. But to second that, I think that it's an individual thing. You know, everybody has their own levels of femininity and masculinity, and I think if you allow other people to tell you what is butch enough or what is femme enough, then, you know, that's on you. You have to own that. You can't allow people to dictate to you, and if you do, then you're not standing up for yourself, and you deserve what you're getting.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, you know, my theory is, if you come to me and say, you know, I grew up in a household with a bunch of folks, and my brother would say when I didn't do something he wanted, he goes, "Oh, she's acting like a man again." And my mother would come out of the kitchen with a pot, and I'd stand there like, I said, "I'm acting like me. You know, what is this? You're acting like a man again? Bullshit. You people keep spreading and spewing venom." But, you know, and then as you get older, I said, you know, I'm more man than he is because he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. And my theory is if you're going to be a butch, be the best butch you know how to be, and if you can't be, then you ask whomever you're with, how can I be a better person to you? You know, and how can I be a better person to myself? If you don't like yourself, you can't be good for anyone else. So that's
I know it's not my turn. I just wanted to speak on something real quick around just sort of how we challenge, and I'm speaking from, you know, the perspective of a masculine of center, black boy with privilege. We have to be really careful with how we sort of embody femphobia and sort of corner the femmes, especially femmes of color, being objectified in this world the way that they are, being a fucking just femmes of color have been taking a beating on this planet for all of existence. So just being careful in how we sort of corner femmes with particular standards, because there is no monolithic black femme. And damn right she don't need to be cooking you dinner. You know what I'm saying? We have to sort of like challenge those dynamics and take on the responsibility and the accountability of masculine of center folks to treat them as divine and really like honor their identities in ways that the outside world and the media don't, and the way that men don't.
This next question is for Stef and LaShay. As a lesbian of color, how do you feel about the term queer? Do you use it to identify yourself?
Alright, so I'm not a lesbian. So that's the first thing. I don't identify as a lesbian of color. And how I feel about the term queer, do I use it to identify myself? I don't use it as like a standalone to identify myself. I use it as more like a part of my identity. And I think that that's okay too. I think it's another misconception within the people of color community. This is a broad statement, so I'm not trying to be offensive. But I do think that it's still like a stigma that it's like a white word. It's a white word if queer is only for white people. And I think that that's just like a stigma in our community. But I personally feel like it's okay. I don't think it just I don't think it's just about your sexual identity. I think it's more broad than that. It can encompass other identities as well. So that's why I say it's more of a part of my identity as opposed to as like just as a standalone.
I love the word queer, and I use it every day. Every day. I totally do. It's not all for shock value, but I do realize that it begins to start the conversation. I think a lot of times we want to like placate and you know, tap dance and two-step around everything. And nobody really wants to like just put the ripples in, and I have no problem with that. And kind of to what you're saying, Steph, and this is not an offensive statement, so if it's an offense, I apologize. But if white folks took R&B and rap and hip hop and rock and roll, well, hell, I'm gonna take queer too then. You know what I mean? My level of connection to who started it is really like null and void. But I do think that for the term queer, what it means is to be not heterosexual. I'm present to that, not being heterosexual. So I do think I've kind of diluted the political stance to the term. And that could be privileged because I'm, you know, a generation or so removed from when it was totally derogatory. I realize that reclamation isn't always the way to go. Everybody want to hit nigga on a rap song too, but you know, this level of, I am removed, and so the privilege that I have to exercise is to say I'm not shot with daggers when that term comes. So that's my stance.
And just another point around, I'm sorry. It's just I think it depends state by state and the geographical location because I think. You know, where we are up here, I think when we think about the term queer, it's still so divided. And then up here in Boston, I can only talk about in Boston, I think when we think of queer, we think of the queers of JP, but we don't ever talk about like the queers who are who are in this room. You know, it's only like in one certain situation. So I think that it's about geographics too as well.
Yeah, and I think too is that people look at that term as like that whole queer theory thing that's from academia. and it's yeah, a class issue around that. But I mean, it's like I use the word dyke. I mean, and I claim that, I own that word. And a lot of people don't use it. A lot of people don't like it. But I mean, for me, that's a word of power. So.
We'll have another wild card question, and we'll start with Dorian and then open it up as well. How do you navigate the privilege of being a feminine or masculine and presenting lesbian, if you use that term?
You know, it's funny, when I got the invitation to this particular panel, I was, you know, I'm not sure if I'm the best person for this, because I don't, masculine, feminine, again, I'm me. I don't really have a, I mean, Constance is Constance. I just met Stef, she's Stef. I don't, she cooks, I cook, I take out the garbage. I mean, I don't know. I don't, geez, I like to wear makeup, but I like sports. So, it's a privilege to be who you are and to be able to express it, and to have friends and family that love you for that. That's the privilege. And as far as a label to it, you can put a label on it. That's fine. You want to label me? That's fine. But I'm not going to do that to you, and I'm not going to do it to myself.
I think that as queer people, I'll use that umbrella term, I think we're so used to excusing our presence that we often feel the need to. I think that one of the coolest things about being a black woman is I don't have to explain anything. My presence alone says enough. And if I'm holding my head as a black woman should in a room, as I've been taught, then my presence speaks enough. You don't have to excuse what comes second and third after that. And for those who challenge that, that's a separate conversation. That's a matter of respect. I think sometimes we're looking for words to defend ourselves in spaces that we don't have to anymore. If we continue to walk with our head downs in rooms, we'll be looked down upon. Yes. If you pick your head up, you'll realize that there's a lot of work. Someone mentioned earlier the work that has been done before us, and the work that I pray will continue after us. Changes have been made. You don't have to look as far as I think as we once did. I think we've done a really great job at creating spaces for ourselves that don't lend, where you don't need an excuse to be who you are. So, just stand up,
So, I was reading the question. It said, how do you navigate your privilege of being a feminine presenting lesbian? So I don't always present feminine, but part of my privilege is that if I didn't out myself to everybody in the room, no one would presume that I was a woman who loved women, right? So part of me navigating my privilege every day, I'm an activist, right? So part of that is when you hear things, you say things. And a lot of people get caught up in the idea of, oh, well, if I say something, I'm not going to be able to have the language to back it up. A simple, I don't agree, goes a long way. Goes a really long way. Well, why don't you agree? I just don't. You don't have to have it back. That's what I'm saying. Like, if something doesn't sound right and you're okay with speaking up in that moment, like, it's hard to be an I call myself an active bystander. So I take that, like, we ride the T, if you see something, say something. I take that to heart. So basically, if there's something that's going on that I'm not feeling, if I don't know, if I hear a bunch of young people cussing each other out, calling each other all kinds of niggas on the train, Hope's going to say something. So it's like, well, did you know that that word was used to oppress our ancestors, and that you're hurting yourself, and that there are white people looking at you, and that you're right? So part of me being, like I said, being a feminine, like, I also have the privilege of, I don't look threatening, right? I'm sitting next to what's your name, babe? Delhia. I'm sitting next to Delhia, right? And so, right? So if we're walking down the street, who would seem more aggressive, or who would seem more like, oh, well, I can't talk to that person? It would be her. And that's part of my privilege, is knowing that people are nice to me. That sucks. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of how, right, I'm more approachable, right? So the part of me utilizing that privilege is, you can't say whatever you want to around me, because I'm going to be able to advocate for it, for whatever it is at that moment.
I think when it comes to having the strength and the privilege of being masculine and feminine, you know, working in corporate America, you know, as women and women who love women, you know, depending on what you look like, you're judged from the minute you walk in the door. We're judged anyway, and it takes about 2 seconds for someone to judge us and come with some wrong conclusion. But when you're in corporate America, you know, I don't go to my office in my chiffon outfit. You know, I walk in the door. You know, but you know, you walk in the door and people are going to try to label you depending. And so some of us, and I'm saying this because I see a lot of younger people in the crowd who are probably trying to figure out, now wait a minute, I want to be professional. How am I going to navigate my way through life? And you have to be true to you. You have to do what you need to do, and that is subjective. You can do whatever you like. But at some point, you're going to be true to yourself, and you're going to have to decide what that truth is. And when you walk in the door, you're going to be judged regardless. And if you are a little more masculine than the average bear, you may get away with some of these things because they figure women of color are a little aggressive anyway. And that's the first thing they'll say, oh, you know, she's cool, she's black. It's like, okay, so then I can kind of say certain things. You know, you learn to know what to say, and how to say it. But I do walk in, I will sit down and do what I got to do. And then when they start talking about their boyfriends and contraceptives and all this other business, gee whiz, good luck. You want to talk about, you know, pancake recipes, okay. I'll talk about the Bruins and I think something about football, I don't know. But it's just you have to figure out who you are and how you're going to present yourself. And it is a privilege. I think being a feminine woman is a huge privilege. When I think about the power they have over me, but think of it, we all have power, and we've got to find out what that power is and how to work that power out for our benefit and for the benefit of the ones we love.
Well, no, I leaned the mic over here because I was going to speak to something that you're talking about where we, and this is something, I see boys in here, a few boys in here went through this program called Brown Boy Project. And shout out to my brown boys. And a lot of what is talked about is sort of like embodying that power, and exactly what you're saying, like being able to kind of leverage it in ways that are accountable to people that have less power in particular situations. So carrying your identity comes with a lot of responsibility. No matter what shoes you're standing in right now, when you can recognize that, and sometimes it's painful to know that there's like certain things about yourself that may disenfranchise other people just in your identity alone. But being able to sort of look that dead in his face and instead of wallowing in that shit, we all grown, right? Then really kind of like understanding that the power that's within us is so great. And if we could kind of all harness that and challenge each other and call each other on that bullshit. When people are sort of, you know, working in the reverse and disempowering others, which in turn disempowers ourselves, right? So sort of like carrying your identity, carrying your privilege in a really responsible and accountable way is what allows us to transform things, right? Because that's what we need to do. Shit is fucked up. And it can't be these, I feel like I'm all over you, sorry. It can't be these surface level solutions. Like we have to really check ourselves and give you know, sort of take the blinders off. And I'm coming from a place of privilege even having this knowledge, and I realize that as well, but just really kind of like taking steps to be self-aware and understand your place in the world and how important it is to stand from that place and do something about it. Because that's what's going to heal us all as a people in the community. That's what we're all here for.
Thank you. I will just what I regret. I mean, I love moderating, but I can't tweet while I'm doing it. So I do encourage people, if there's some amazing things coming out of this panel, to get them out into the universe so that people know and can share and can benefit from what we are privileged really to be in this room together. So it's #2012 LOCS. Please tweet. All right, okay. Gender role. A question for Constance, for Genesis, for Jordan. How have they impacted your life as a queer person of color? Do you use gender roles when determining the dynamics of your relationship? Constance?
Well, I spoke a little bit about this before, and yeah, I don't really lock myself into roles. I think that limits, the scope of your relationship. It limits how much joy that can be in everything, So, no, gender roles aren't so much a lock. Although I do fix things. I'm the person who can fix things, but I've always been that way. Oh yeah, I have tools. But I also took a sewing class and made an apron. So, and my partner can pick up things that I can't pick up because she does boot camp and I don't. So, yeah, I'm really not about the gender roles. I'm really not about locking myself or being in a relationship where one is locked into, open the door for me, I don't do this, you do that, you always pay for the date, or, and I've heard people talk about, expectations, and I've met people that have talked to me in the past about their expectations, and it's like, I'm sorry, I can't meet those, That's not me, that's not who I am, this is me, and yeah, this is how I present myself, and I shop in the men's department because that's where my clothes are. They're not but I think if you have a solid, your relationship should not depend on what box you fit in or what you do. I think it's a beautiful combination of things.
Yeah. I think that gender roles have come up a lot for me with regards to relationships, whether they're platonic or not. I don't do well in spaces where I have to be a man, and I don't deal well in spaces where I'm expected to act as a particular type of woman. I often feel a great deal of responsibility to my partner with regards of protecting, with regards of finances, with regards of, I'm just being honest, but I don't do well when I'm expected to do that. And what I mean is, as a boy or as a black woman, I love to be courted. I love to be taken to dinner. I love to be cooked for. But I love doing all of those things for my partner as well. And so I guess I would challenge us all to challenge ourselves to find out where our source of love is, where the source is that wherever it is that whomever you're around where you feel loved growing up, whoever taught you what it feels like to be loved, you should employ that same type of love in relationships because it tends to be a healthier means of loving. Anything that feels too boxed or too one-sided is actually unhealthy. And I guess what scares me about this question is oftentimes these gender roles put us into really unhealthy relationships where you're doing things with a partner that you know in the pit of your gut you really shouldn't be tolerating. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you're dating someone of the same sex as much as it's not healthy for you. So as queer people, let's be really responsible with how we see, A, that we're worthy of being loved, and then B, that we're worthy of being loved in a healthy means, and however we choose that around who we are.
Yeah, I've met people who said, yeah, how do I do this, because this person wants, this is what they said they want. And I want this person, but that's not who I am. I said, well then, that's not the person for you. And people get the whole unhealthy relationship thing is so true, where people get locked into trying to be something that they're not. Because of whatever outside perception is. And I think that's the important thing, is to place yourself in healthy situations and not try to be who you're not. You need to be you.
I also want to say sorry, but I also want to say that sex is very, very different from what necessarily happens in your kitchen. What I mean is, those can be two separate things. You can enjoy one side sexually and really not while you're walking into McDonald's or Starbucks. You don't have to add that up for anyone. I certainly don't. I don't invite you to do the same. I think it's important to be honest with ourselves about the fact that being queer, for many of us, means being fluid. It means that there is a mirror, and that what stares back at me is not always necessarily what I'm putting out. So, yeah, sorry.
No, I was going to take a slightly different approach. And that could be because I am Southern, more than queer at this particular moment. That can change shortly, but the point is, because I do think that there are, as we're talking, I think at this table, we all agree that anything boxy is rough. Unless it's like a box shitty. But again, that's a Southern thing. The point is, really the question should be, how do we expand those things called gender roles? Because I never probably have the door open for me or the trash taken out. If everything is overflowing, I'm going to do it. But in the process, if somebody else is here and they want to put on some BVDs and take it out, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to complain. But again, there is a level of having learned within myself that I am no less woman if I take the trash out or if I pay for dinner tonight and the next night. Now that 20th night, we don't have to talk about that. But so really the question is, because there are people in this room who at the end of the day want a woman or they want a man. So I don't want to remove that space for you. But the question, kind of what Genesis was saying, is how can you expand that? And if all you're doing is being unhealthy in that space and you are feeling a lot of pressure, then you need to release that, however you so choose. So that's what I'm saying. Gender roles can be very touchy, but I think they are necessary to some degree. But how we learn to live in that space is something to be discussed.
I have one thing to add. And for those who like to be taken out, the ladies who like to be treated like ladies, don't second guess it. If that's what you like, you set up those expectations, you say what you want. You don't get what you want unless you say that's what you want. No one's going to guess for you. And if you want to take out the trash, or take her to dinner, or make sure her gas tank is filled, clean her car, whatever it is that she's appreciative, by all means, do it. I believe in treating her like a queen, and that's just my personal thing. Everyone has their own way of expressing themselves, and for those of you who feel like, well, I'm boxed in, well, then get out of the box. But if those are things that you like, then make sure you say that without any reservation. Own what you want, and don't be ashamed of it, because after all, you've got to live with it. So you don't want to live with some schmitty you're not interested in because they can't do what you need, and then you cat around because you're not satisfied. Not working?
All right, we have about, we could probably take 3 or 4 questions from the audience. So if you have a question to ask our fantastic panel, please stand up and ask.
Hi, my name is Sheila. There was a time that, I guess maybe in the 80s, 90s, women weren't really, or men weren't really doing the male-female role thing. That was kind of like old hat, so to speak. And then somewhere in the 2000s, in the 21st millennium, that changed. So my question is, what do you think happened? Because we went back to the black community, as you know, as you have it, went back to that old school role of role playing, where it kind of disappeared, you know, somewhere along the way, and then it kind of picked back up. So what is that really saying about how we feel about ourselves and our communities and our relationships, and what do you think that really all means?
I mean, I don't know the answer, right? But I feel like in a lot of ways, I think a lot of times it has to do with lack of visibility, and just sort of taking cues from a very white model of Butch, Femme, you know, and what that dynamic looks like. And if we like want to go there, a lot of that shit is just really just to keep systematically putting people in a particular place. So I can't sit here and say that when I was even there during that time, I was there. But just speaking to what that looks like. But I can tell you though that working through Brooklyn Boyhood and stuff like that, there is definitely a movement around sort of breaking down those binaries and you know, introducing things like fluidity. And a lot of those things are hitting walls when it comes to like class and geography and different things like that, which to me yells that this is a systematic oppressive thing that sort of happened. But then at the same token, there's nothing wrong with holding on to that dynamic if it's true to you, right? But it's about kind of like peering at it from a scope of brain labs. Peering at it from a scope of like not really, okay. Peering at it from a scope of making sure that you're not just sort of owning those things because that's what society is telling you to do or whatever. But
can I quickly say something to that? And it's like, I don't think it like disappeared, went away. I mean, it's historical. There's a great documentary about Ruth Ellis, who passed away probably about 4 or 5 years ago at like age 100. Those roles have always historically been in our community. I think what you had mentioned, that it did kind of, during that certain period of late 70s, early 80s, kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of got whitewashed, but it was still there. It was still there. I was not a baby during that time. And in communities of color, it was very much still butch femme or stud femme, that kind of dynamic. So I don't think it ever really went away. I just think the invisibility happened. But historically, it's always been there. You know, going back to as far as you can go back.
I'm from Boston, and a few of us, I see my Boston people.
Yeah.
But I actually had a conversation with Sheila in a previous thing. We were like, well, you know, there's a lot of women of color, lesbians, you know, or whatever, queer, in Boston. It's like, why aren't they here? Like, why, you know? No, but I mean, I've been out and about since I was like 19, 21. I know tons of people within, you know, Boston, and it's like, you know, I know that we are, you know, the city of higher education. I like how you guys talk about privilege, because there's a privilege. Just, I mean, when people may see Harvard, they might be a little intimidated, but you know, like, okay, maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe, you know, I mean, we're definitely to be here is privilege. We always attest to white privilege. You know, people of color do have privilege within their dynamics, and I think that's a powerful statement. But I just was curious, you know, like maybe next year, or you know, how can we make this like bigger, because the community is here. You know, and everyone raised their hand. I'm just curious. How can we, you know?
We gotta wait.
You know, let me just say, HBGC has done, because I was the first woman
when I walked into HBGC, I was the first woman to walk in. And now, it's, I don't know, a year later, year and a half? And 2 years, and now, look, I mean, hello. You know, I mean, I'm the first woman. So they, you know, this is how you do it. You start, and you keep going, and you keep going, and you're right. And you get out, and you maybe get on a committee, or you join, I think, was JoJo passing out flyers to join HBGC? I'm not even sure what he's passing out, but I'm assuming he was. Was it? Surveys. Okay, well, fill out the surveys and join HBGC. But that's how it starts. I mean, you start this year, we start with whatever, 120, next year is 240, 360, and you keep going, you go, and you go. And you don't lose that, the thoughts that you have from, you know, when you're 19, when you're 20, and then it goes on and on and on. But I mean, HBGC has done a great job, and bring a friend. I mean, they've done a great job.
Next time, bring a friend.
I just wanted to say, I think it's also important, I think it's important to mainstream queer conversation. And what I mean by that is, when I left on Friday, my students, I'm a high school math teacher, they knew I was coming to Harvard to speak about issues that concern queer Black people, and then deeper, myself as a boy. And so what I'm saying is, you gotta, you know, talk to people. Again, stop living in the closet. I'm gonna really stand strong on that, even for myself. Don't fem up when you go home. A friend of mine taught me that.
Yeah.
Really, really, you know, stand on your podium and speak up for yourself. And talk about this as if it's, you know, it's popping. Like, of course, you're not going? What do you mean? And people feel more inclined to, A, ask you about what it is that we're doing, ask you about your personal work with the endeavors of our community, and then so on and so forth. So, you know, hold your head up and talk about it.
Joanne in the back, recently engaged. Congratulations. Sorry, congratulations.
Yay!
I guess it's not really a question. I just kind of wanted to address Amber, because just from what I see and what I feel, the lesbian of color, the community here in Boston, you know, they feel like, well, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to go where all the gay people go. Like, sometimes I just feel like they want to be outside of the group. They don't want to be like, oh, I'm not doing what everybody's doing. I'm going to be my own person. But at the same time, you know, they don't want to, what they feel like the community is the club. Yeah. They feel like it's just a club. They don't, so they don't take the time to see what this is about. They don't take the time to come out and, you know, find out what's going on in the community, you know, just expand their minds, just their thoughts, their biases, because I know, speaking for myself, when I first came out, all I really knew in Boston was, I mean, other than Glass, was the club. And the club scene is really not, it's not motivating, it's not uplifting as a lesbian of color community, because there's always drama, there's always fight.
And that's the certain type of club.
I mean,
exactly. There's other events, but very segregated.
Yeah. It really is. And it's like, you know, there are no, the white people don't come, we don't visit the same clubs, you know, like the white queers or lesbians, whatever, they go to one club and the lesbians of color go to another club. And then when they have events, there's the events that a lot of the queer LGBT community do that the white people are involved in, and black people, the lesbians of color, don't take part in it, they don't want to, they don't find out about it. So I mean, I took it upon myself to go see one of the all these acronyms. I took it upon myself to go see what that was about, and I decided to stick with it because this is the community that I want. This is the community I want to be a part of, because the community is very inclusive. There's a lot of people of different ages, there's a lot of people of different identities, and they identify differently, and, you know, there's such I mean, look around. There's a large group of people here. You get to know different people, meet different people, and that's what this community should be. That's what this community is, but they don't take the time to find out about it, because, again, all they see is the club scene, the drama, and the fighting, and it's like, that's why they're not here right now. I mean, you can speak about it all you want to, it's like, I don't want to go to that. And I think you want so much, and you think more like a community. Like, I can talk to these people in the lake,
have been there have been diminished, if not completely wiped out.
In the same breath, I'm going to say this real quick because I see the sister's hand in the back. We do have to realize that we have to meet people where they are. And as my grandma used to say, you got to have hoes and housewives. Somebody has to have a story to say, I used to be in the club all the time. I'm so glad I came to HBGC. You know, we can't expect everybody to be progressive all day because everybody had hood music. You just got to
just to kind of echo what LaShay just said. Yeah, we do have to meet people where we at. We also have to recognize, we have to understand that privilege is an issue. We can't just ignore that. I mean, privilege is real. And like, we do have to meet people where they are. Yes, some people are at the club. A lot of the people that I went to the club with aren't in this room. But again, it's about meeting them where they're at. That doesn't mean that they don't want to be here. They have to know about it. They do. I'm pretty sure they know about it. But they have to be introduced. You have to like bring them along with you. Like, and we can't just assume just because we have it, they're going to show up. There's some more steps that we have to take as a community to merge the communities a little bit better. We're on the right path, but I still think we have to continue. I think it's all of our responsibilities to, you know, bring someone else.
Right, that's it.
I was just going real quick say that I think you probably know this because I know we're running out of time, but I think Brooklyn Boyhood, I don't know if people are familiar, but we host parties to fundraise our initiative. And we find challenges in like trying to like let people know that yeah, we throw these big ass, crazy, very fun. But we do it for a purpose, and I think we try to like we MC these things, and like in the middle of it, we be like, yo, we're here to celebrate, we're here to express, you know, our love for brown boys of color. Like we try to like keep that message, you know, as we party, because we're creating a community space, but we're also funding our work. And so, you know, I guess that's kind of the approach that we've taken, and it works. It really, really works.
Just to piggyback off what Ryan is saying, the club scene has always been sort of, dare I say, church for queer people. It's important that we take back our churches and our information centers. So Brooklyn Boyhood, there's an HIV truck outside, testing truck outside of our parties. That's purposely done. That's saying you're waiting in line to get into this party, take 10 minutes, get an HIV test, and party. So that's a way where we're bridging or taking back our church. You know, use the space for our
Please join me in giving a round of applause for